Hi friends, hello the world. Welcome back to this episode of Complaint Free Life, and with you, as usual, your host, Tasel Ormonova. As you can see, I'm trying out some of the headwear lately to to experiment and make my days flowerier than usual because I'm in the village in Kyrgyzstan with my mom, as you know, and seeing a lot of headwear from other women got me inspired to do this as well. And you may be also wondering what's behind me, all of those sticker notes, and those are chemical elements that my niece is studying to prepare herself for the med school that I want to finance. So that's why we have a deal that if she has a good test results, then I will finance her to go to med school. Anyway, so that's about my life in the village and how things are going. Today's episode that I want to talk about is counterintuitive life may be actually less costly. And I will explain to you in a minute what I mean by it. But before as usual, I want to ask several questions for you to consider in your own life. So, what trends do you follow in life? Are you rather someone who avoids feeling negative feelings, thinking it's hard than actually feeling it? Or you're someone who actually always feels them? Which one are you in? Which category you belong to? Are you rather someone who bites the bullet and stays in the job that hates or the relationship that you hate because you think it's hard to go after the alternative? Or you're someone who actually goes after the alternative thinking, no, I'm going to do this my way anyway. I'm not prepared to bite the bullet. Are you someone who postpones making decisions thinking it's hard that way rather than making decisions on time, thinking that's actually easier that way? Are you someone who fears losing time, thinking that it can't be wasted, yet keep thinking about it and unfortunately keep losing time? Or you're someone who says, I'm going to use my time meaningfully and this is how it is, and you go for it. So if you are in my email list, you probably also receive some other versions of these. For instance, lately I've been observing that it's actually easier or less painful, I should say, not easier, but less painful to have a difficult conversation than avoid it. And I also noticed that it's actually easier or better to tell your truth than to be dishonest with yourself. And the other thing I'm also noticing that I've been talking about is that it's actually easier to go after what you want in life than keep forcing yourself to do things that you don't like doing. So these are the things that I've been talking to you about over the week. And also I sent you an email if you're in my email list about all of these things. But here today, I want to focus more on why counterintuitive way of living might actually be less costly than doing things the usual way. Now, I looked it up, counterintuitive, and it's probably different than the intuition. So that's why please don't misunderstand me hearing that I'm telling you don't listen to your intuition or don't listen to your inner wisdom. As you know that I'm a big fan of listening to intuition and listening to inner wisdom all of the time. This particular video is about living life in counterintuitive way. And counterintuitive, I looked up the definition, which is essentially doing thing in the way that you don't usually expect doing. Okay, so it has something to do with expectation. So now let's start from the beginning of at least the way that I've tried to structure my thinking around it is that why counterintuitive is less costly, right? So I will be only taking these examples, but you can also see any other examples that comes to your mind. But the examples that I want to be looking at is feeling the emotions and feelings, making decisions instead of postponing. So the usual expectation is whenever we're experiencing feeling negative feelings, whenever we're experiencing making decisions, whenever we're experiencing not liking our jobs or relationships, whenever those types of experiences, usual intuitive way of doing things that we do, I mean, unless of course you are someone else that does not belong to this category. But usually what I observe from people and myself as well, the intuitive way of looking at it is that let's just avoid the feeling those negative emotions. Let's just avoid and suppress them rather than actually feeling it in the moment when it's happening, right? So that's the intuitive way of doing it. The other intuitive way is that we think that it's let's postpone making decisions because making decisions is hard. That's the intuitive way. Or we just say, let's bite the bullet and continue working. Apologize, I am recording at home and people keep entering my room. So anyway, so coming back to this topic of doing things in the intuitive way, this is how we usually do, right? Because we think that doing any other way is harder, and therefore let's just avoid it. Therefore, let's just bite the bullet and continue working in the place that we don't like, or having relationships that we don't like, or keep postponing decisions that we think hard to make decisions. So this is the usual way of doing it. Now, I am arguing that that's the costliest and more difficult way of doing it than the actual way, which is when you do things on time when things are happening. In other words, it's actually less costly to experience the negative feeling in those minutes and hours if necessary, than keep avoiding suppressing it. Because whenever we keep avoiding suppressing it, we know that one day we will explode or implode. It's just that whenever we're avoiding it, we are agreeing to experience those emotions in the longer run with long suffering, rather than suffering in the moment when it's happening, just experiencing, letting it through. The same with staying in the job that we hate, or staying in a relationship we hate. If we decide to do something about it in that moment when we have that feeling, that's actually less costly than keep doing it, keep forcing ourselves, and keep trying to find new ways to suppress all of those emotions, feelings in that place, in that relationship, rather than making a decision in that moment and say, no, I'm going to do something else, or I leave, or I'm going to change whatever is happening, solve whatever is happening. So it saves us actually a lot of time, brain energy, and we rather suffer through right there and then, rather than keep prolonging it, keep thinking about it, and keep worrying about it for a long time, and then eventually doing it anyway. So I think I've been able to explain why counterintuitive ways of living in this case is less costly than doing it intuitively, doing it as the way that we always expect doing, right? So now when we know this, obviously, knowledge alone is not enough, because you may know many things, but it doesn't mean that you've implemented it. And I know it from my own experience as well, that the obvious answer of what we need to do is face the fear, right? Obviously, facing the fear is dangerous if it concerns our physical health or safety, and that's the reason why we have fear from the evolution, so that's very useful. However, in these examples, in these types of situations, facing the fear or experiencing that negative feeling in that moment is actually the easiest, the better way of solving things, because then it doesn't lead to imploding, exploding. It doesn't lead to longer suffering. It doesn't lead to avoiding and using, over consuming alcohol or overeating or over doing something else in order to avoid these feelings, which then cost a lot on their own as well. So, like the principle that we have also in business, where it says that it's more costly to do least expensive things, right? So the same logic applies here if you want to look at it differently. So now notice that whenever you are deciding, okay, so I'm going to try this out. I don't really believe you, but I'm going to try that out anyway. So that's amazing. So that's what we want. We want to give our brains a chance to experience a bit and see how it feels. Now, when the thing's happening, when you need to make a decision, when you need to experience negative feelings, your brain will automatically want to go the usual way, the intuitive way, the expected way, to avoid it, to resist it, to go away from it. That's normal. But we want to keep noticing it, but still keep observing and experiencing it. Even if our brain wants us to get us out of there, we just want to say, no, it's fine. Let's see what's such a big deal about disappointment is, or what's a big deal about frustration. Let's have a look, let's have experience. Take small steps if necessary, but important that you keep facing it and facing it, going through it, even if your brain tries to get you out of there. And at some point you realize that you actually don't need to fear any of it. You actually can just face whatever is happening in that moment, suffer through that in that moment, instead of extending it in the long run if you keep avoiding it. Because like with drinking, we know that after the hangover, all the problems come back again if we drank it because of avoiding problems, right? So that's why, in order not to do that, let's just face it now, here and now, and experience it. And then see what happens. You will have this feeling of relief that you have gone through it, and you will feel such a strength within you. You start believing yourself, trusting yourself that you can go through this. And it was actually not as bad as you thought it would be. It's a bit like for me, when I go to a doctor to get an injection, I have at first this fear of, it's going to be hard. But then I notice and I'm like, wait a minute, let's have a look. Let's see what happens. And then the injection happens. And then there is this very, in the beginning, this point. And then afterwards, it's not actually a big deal. And even if it is, we know that it passes, right? So that's the same type of logic, that even if it's suffering, even if it's painful, we know that it passes. We rather face it, we rather look at it and done with it, then keep working on it, keep postponing it, keep extending it unnecessarily. Okay, so And the last point that I want to make about this is that in the end of the day, all of this counterintuitive way of living is not, the purpose is not to like it, right? The purpose is not to like suffering or to like what we're going through. The purpose is experiencing it. So don't try to make it sound like, oh, it's a good thing that we're doing, or it's a, I'm gonna suffering is such a great thing or whatever. No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that experience whatever is happening in that moment, take decisions in that moment that you want to take, or rather take decisions in the moment where you want to postpone taking decisions because you think it's hard. So whenever this feeling of, oh, it's hard to do, therefore I just avoid it, just face the hardship. And then see that you can go through it, see that you can actually handle it a lot better than you think. And then you are on the other side of the tunnel and you're like, this is what I've been avoiding all my life, or this is what I've been trying to postpone all my life. Why? What was the big deal? Right? And of course, this will come with practice, but notice whenever your brain wants to say, okay, let's avoid it. Okay, let's just suppress it. Let's just postpone it. You bring your brain or the thoughts back and say, no, 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 let's do this. Let's actually sit and experience. Okay, that's what I wish for you all, to try out the less costly, counterintuitive way of living, at least in those areas. If not anything, at least try with feelings, because no one can notice them. You can just experience it yourself. You don't need to tell anyone. And then see how much this gives you the strength, how much trust, how much courage this gives you to actually look at everything else and say, I can do this. I can do hard things. I can do harder ways, but I know that this passes. And I no longer need to sign up for long extended versions of usual expected ways of living. Okay, my friends, have a beautiful weekend, you all, and talk to you next week. Bye.